America has many rifles, but only one rifle can start a national argument before anyone explains what it is. The AR-15 is called a normal civilian firearm by one side and a symbol of danger by the other. Some people see it as a tool for sport, defense, and collection. Others see it through the pain of mass shootings and breaking news. The strange part is that both sides are often looking at the same rifle, but they are not telling the same story. To understand why the AR-15 became so misunderstood, you have to go back before the politics, before the headlines, and before the rifle became a symbol. The first misunderstanding starts with the name. Many people hear AR-15 and think the letters mean assault rifle. They do not. The letters come from ArmaLite, the company that helped develop the early design in the 1950s. That one mistake has shaped countless arguments because once people attach the wrong meaning to the name, the rest of the debate starts on shaky ground. ArmaLite was not trying to create a culture war. It was a small company working with new ideas, lighter materials, and a different rifle layout. The goal was to make a lighter firearm than many older military rifles. At the time, armies wanted weapons that were easier to carry and easier to control. The early AR design came from that world, but the civilian story later became much bigger than the original military link. In 1959, Colt bought the rights to the AR-15 design. The military version later became closely tied to the M16 during the Vietnam era, and that family link still shapes how people see the civilian AR-15 today. Many people look at the shape and assume it works like a military machine gun, but that is not how the common civilian version is legally sold. The typical civilian AR-15 is semi-automatic. That means one pull of the trigger fires one round. A machine gun, under US law, fires more than one round automatically with one function of the trigger. That difference separates a common semi-automatic rifle from a tightly controlled automatic weapon. Still, the visual image is powerful. Most people do not study firearm law before forming an opinion. They see the black finish, the straight lines, the magazine, and the military look, then the emotion arrives before the facts. This is where the AR-15 becomes harder to explain than many older rifles. A woodstock hunting rifle can fire powerful rounds, but it does not carry the same public image. A shotgun can be common in homes, but it does not carry the same political weight. The AR-15 looks modern and military style, so it creates a reaction before anyone talks about how it functions. Shape does not change the law, but it can change public fear. For years, the AR-15 was not the giant of American gun culture. It existed in the civilian market, but it was not the center of everything. Many hunters still preferred bolt-action rifles, lever guns, and shotguns. Many gun owners saw the AR as unusual or specialized. That changed after the 1994 federal assault weapons ban expired in 2004. After the ban ended, AR-style rifles became far more visible and sales grew fast. The timing mattered. America was living through the post-9/11 years. Military imagery was everywhere. Veterans were coming home with experience around modern rifles. Gun companies also leaned into a new kind of marketing. It became part of a wider message about rights, preparedness, identity, and freedom. That message connected with many buyers, and the platform grew from a niche rifle into one of the most recognized firearms in the country. But politics was not the only reason it became popular. The platform also had practical reasons behind its rise. It was light compared with many older rifles, had low recoil compared with larger calibers, and could fit many different users. Manufacturers built many versions of it, and the market around it became huge. For some owners, it became a sport rifle. For others, it became a home defense firearm. Some bought it for collecting, some bought it because it had become part of modern gun culture. Some owners rarely fired it. That is one reason the public argument feels so divided. Critics often talk about the worst events connected to AR-style rifles. Owners often talk about lawful use, sport shooting, and the fact that millions of people own these rifles without committing crimes. Both parts of the story are real, but they do not cancel each other out. That is why the argument never ends. Each side keeps pointing to a different truth. By 2026, firearm industry figures estimated more than 32 million modern sporting rifles in circulation in the United States since 1990. That term includes AR-style rifles and similar platforms, not one single model. Still, the number shows how common this rifle family has become. A firearm that common cannot be explained only through news clips. At the same time, a firearm linked to some of the country's most painful mass shootings cannot be explained only through normal ownership. This is the hard center of the AR-15 story. In daily gun violence, rifles are not the main weapon category. Public data has often shown that handguns are used far more often in murders. Pew's 2026 update using FBI data also showed handguns making up the largest known share, while rifles were a much smaller share. But that data comes with a warning. The larger pattern is still clear. Handguns drive most gun murders, not rifles. But numbers do not erase memory. When an AR-style rifle appears in a mass shooting, the public does not experience it as a small percentage. People remember the faces, the families, and the news footage. Las Vegas, Sandy Hook, Uvalde, Buffalo, and Highland Park became part of the national memory. For many Americans, the AR-15 is not first understood as a range rifle or a legal product. It is remembered as the firearm shape seen after tragedy. That is why the debate cannot be settled by one statistic. A weapon can be uncommon in everyday murder data and still become central to the fear of mass violence. A rifle can be lawfully owned by millions and still be tied to events that make millions of others want restrictions. It is a split between different experiences of the same object. The words around the AR-15 make the debate even more confusing. People often use assault rifle, assault weapon, modern sporting rifle, and semi-automatic rifle as if they mean the same thing. They do not. Assault rifle usually refers to a select-fire military rifle. The common civilian AR-15 is not usually that. Assault weapon is a legal and political term, and its meaning changes depending on the law. Modern sporting rifle is a firearm industry term, and critics often see it as branding. So before Americans even debate policy, they argue over language. Call it a sporting rifle, and the focus shifts to lawful owners and the shooting range. Call it an assault weapon, and the focus shifts to danger and restriction. The rifle has not changed, but the frame around it has. The legal fight is still moving. Some states and Washington, D.C. restrict certain AR-style rifles under assault weapon laws. Other states allow them widely. In 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to take up major challenges over assault weapon and magazine restrictions, but the issue did not disappear. In 2026, legal fights over magazine limits and semi-automatic rifle rules were still active. It is also part of a court debate and a constitutional debate. Supporters often frame the issue around rights. They argue that millions of law-abiding Americans should not lose access to a common rifle because criminals misuse firearms. They also argue that the Second Amendment protects more than old-fashioned weapons. It is one of the most common rifle platforms in the country. Critics frame the issue around public safety. They argue that certain semi-automatic rifles and magazine sizes can make mass shootings more deadly. They believe the law can limit certain weapons without ending gun ownership. To them, the AR-15 is not just another rifle because it appears too often in the worst national nightmares. This is why the AR-15 debate gets so emotional. One side hears a threat to freedom, the other hears a threat to safety. One side sees lawful ownership being blamed for crime, the other sees preventable risk being defended as normal. When the same object carries that much meaning, every argument becomes personal. The AR-15 is misunderstood when people think its name means assault rifle. It is misunderstood when people think the common civilian version is a machine gun. It is also misunderstood when people act like it has no lawful civilian use. But the misunderstanding goes both ways. It is also wrong to ignore why so many people fear it. Those fears did not come from nowhere. They came from real tragedy and grief. That is why a serious story about the AR-15 cannot be only pro-gun or anti-gun. It has to explain the machine, the market, the law, the deaths, the politics, and the emotion. Leave out one part, and the story becomes too easy. The truth is more difficult, and that is exactly why the rifle became so controversial. Mechanically, the AR-15 is a semi-automatic rifle platform. Culturally, it is much bigger than that. It became a product, a political symbol, a legal question, a safety fear, and for many owners, a normal part of their household. That mix is what makes it different from almost any other rifle in America. A deer rifle may be more powerful, a handgun may be used more often in crime, a shotgun may be older in American homes, but none of them carry the same national charge as the AR-15. That is why the AR-15 debate never stays only about metal, parts, or laws. The rifle carries a different meaning depending on who is looking at it. For many owners, it is tied to personal freedom, self-defense, sport shooting, and the right to own a common firearm. For many critics, it is tied to fear, mass shootings, and a feeling that America has failed to control its most dangerous weapons. The same rifle can sit in a safe for years without hurting anyone, then appear in a tragedy and become the center of national anger. That is what makes the AR-15 so hard to explain. In the end, the AR-15 became America's most misunderstood rifle because it landed at the center of America's deepest argument: freedom versus safety, rights versus fear, facts versus symbols. The rifle did not create that fight by itself. It became the object people used to fight over it. And after more than half a century, the biggest argument around the AR-15 is still not only about how it works, it is about what Americans believe when they see it.